The blood-red sunrise crept over the jagged horizon of Wasco, California, in the spring of 1873, revealing Bethany Tucker huddled beneath the old cottonwood tree, her trembling hands clutching an empty wooden cradle. Her dress was torn and mudded, her copper hair hanging in tangles around her pale face streaked with tears and dirt. She'd been there all night, rocking the vacant cradle as if her sheer will might summon back what she had lost. Gabriel Baxter reined in his dappled gray stallion, dust swirling around horse and rider as he approached the strange scene. He'd been on his way back to his ranch after a long cattle drive, exhausted and looking forward to his own bed, when he spotted the woman's silhouette against the crimson sky. Something about her stillness, the defeated slump of her shoulders, made him dismount and approach cautiously. "Madam," he called softly, pushing back his worn leather hat to reveal sandy brown hair and concerned hazel eyes. "Are you hurt?" Bethany's gaze remained fixed on the empty cradle. Her fingers traced the smooth, hand-carved wood, lingering over the small flowers etched into the headboard. "He took her," she whispered, her voice cracked from crying. "My husband took our baby girl." Gabriel crouched down beside her, noticing the bruises on her wrists, the swelling around her left eye that she tried to conceal by turning away. "Your husband did this to you, Thomas." She breathed the name like a curse. "We argued. I said I wanted to leave to take Emma back east to my sister. He was drunk, so angry." Her voice broke. "When I woke, they were gone. The horses, the wagon, our daughter. Everything." Gabriel's jaw tightened. He'd heard about Thomas Tucker, a mean drunk who'd gambled away most of his homestead. The man had a reputation for his quick temper, but Gabriel hadn't known about a wife or child. He looked at Bethany's hands, raw and bleeding from where she'd been digging at the dirt around the tree. "I thought maybe he buried something here," she explained, following his gaze. "A message, a clue. Something to torment me further." Gabriel stood and offered his calloused hand to her. "Mrs. Tucker, you can't stay out here. Let me help you." Bethany stared at his outstretched hand, then back at the empty cradle. "I can't leave her," she whispered. Gabriel knelt again, his eyes meeting hers directly. "We'll find your daughter," he promised, his voice firm with conviction. "But first, you need shelter and care." She studied his face for a long moment, searching for deceit or danger. Finding none, she placed her small, dirt-covered hand in his. "We will fill it with love," Gabriel said, nodding toward the cradle. "Whether we find your Emma or not, that cradle won't stay empty. I promise you that." Something in his words, in the steady certainty of his grip, gave Bethany the strength to stand. Together, they lifted the empty cradle and Gabriel secured it to his saddle. "My ranch is about an hour's ride from here," he said, helping her mount his horse before climbing up behind her. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Hollies, will tend to your injuries. Then we'll start searching for your girl." As they rode away from the cottonwood tree, Bethany leaned against Gabriel's chest, exhaustion finally claiming her. For the first time in months, she felt safe. The empty cradle bounced gently against the horse's flank, a hollow reminder of what she had lost, but also perhaps a promise of what might be found. Gabriel felt the woman's weight against him as she fell asleep, her body relaxing in the rhythm of the horse's gait. He'd come to California 10 years ago with nothing but dreams of building something that was his own. Now, at 32, he had a modest but successful cattle ranch, respected hands who worked for him, and a reputation for fair dealings. What he didn't have was a family. Looking down at the sleeping woman and the empty cradle, he wondered if fate had placed them in his path for a reason. When they arrived at the Circle B Ranch, Mrs. Hollies, a round, stern-faced widow who had been Gabriel's housekeeper since he built the place, came bustling out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "Good heavens, Mr. Baxter, what's all this?" she exclaimed, eyeing the unconscious woman in his arms as he dismounted, carrying Bethany carefully. "This is Mrs. Tucker," Gabriel explained quietly. "Her husband has run off with their baby daughter after hurting her badly. She needs our help." Mrs. Hollis's expression softened immediately. "The spare room is made up. Bring her in while I fetch some hot water and my medicines." Gabriel carried Bethany into the modest but well-built ranch house. It was nothing grand: 4 bedrooms, a kitchen with a large hearth, a dining room, and a sitting area filled with books. What it lacked in grandeur, it made up for in comfort. He laid Bethany gently on the bed in the guest room, removing her mud-caked boots but leaving the rest of her attire for Mrs. Hollis to manage. As he stepped back, Bethany's eyes fluttered open. Disoriented, she jerked upright. "Emma." "Easy," Gabriel said, raising his hands in a calming gesture. "You're safe at my ranch. This is Mrs. Hollis, my housekeeper. She's going to help clean you up." Bethany's wild-eyed panic subsided slightly as she took in her surroundings. "The cradle, I've brought it in," he assured her. "It's in the corner there." She nodded, relieved, then winced as the movement caused pain. Mrs. Hollis clucked her tongue. "Mr. Baxter, you go on now. I'll tend to Mrs. Tucker," the older woman said firmly. "And perhaps you might send Miguel to town for the doctor." Gabriel nodded, giving Bethany one last reassuring glance before leaving. He found his foreman, Miguel Sanchez, in the stable. "We have a situation," Gabriel explained, quickly outlining what had happened. "I need you to fetch Dr. Reynolds, and while you're in town, ask around about Thomas Tucker. Find out if anyone's seen him with a baby girl, or if he mentioned where he might be heading." Miguel, a compact man with intelligent eyes who'd been with Gabriel since the beginning, nodded gravely. "I know of this Tucker. Bad man. He owes money to half the saloons in the county." "That might help us track him," Gabriel said thoughtfully. "Men who owe debts leave trails." As Miguel rode off, Gabriel returned to the house, settling the empty cradle in the sitting room. He ran his fingers over the fine workmanship. Someone had put love into making this. He doubted it was Thomas Tucker. Mrs. Hollis emerged from the guest room, carrying a basin of water tinged pink with blood. Her expression was grim. "That poor child," she said quietly. "Her back is covered in welts, some old, some new. She says her husband used his belt on her whenever he drank, which was often." Gabriel's hands clenched into fists. "And the baby? Little Emma is 6 months old. According to Mrs. Tucker, her husband never hurt the child, but she feared it was only a matter of time. That's why she wanted to leave." Mrs. Hollis shook her head. "She's sleeping now. I gave her some laudanum for the pain, but Mr. Baxter—" "Yes, she's near broken with worry. Says her milk will dry up if she doesn't nurse her baby soon." The housekeeper looked troubled. "And there's something else. She believes her husband took the child to punish her, not because he wanted Emma." Gabriel absorbed this information grimly. "Then we need to find them quickly." Later that afternoon, Miguel returned with Dr. Reynolds, a tall, thin man with spectacles and a perpetually worried expression. After examining Bethany, he confirmed what Mrs. Hollis had already determined: she was badly bruised and malnourished, but with proper care would recover physically. "The emotional wounds may take longer to heal," the doctor said privately to Gabriel, "especially if the child isn't found." Gabriel walked the doctor out to his buggy. "What do you know about Thomas Tucker?" he asked. Dr. Reynolds frowned. "Came to town about 2 years ago with his young bride. She was already with child. There were rumors he'd had to leave their previous home in Nevada rather hastily, something about cheating at cards." He adjusted his spectacles. "I delivered their baby girl last autumn. Mrs. Tucker was such a gentle soul, always doting on the child. Tucker, though." I never liked the way he looked at either of them. Any idea where he might have gone? Miguel asked around town. Apparently, Tucker was boasting at Harley's saloon 3 nights ago about a big opportunity waiting in San Francisco. Said he needed traveling money. The doctor's expression darkened. He tried to sell his pocket watch but ended up losing it in a card game to Sela's Warren. Gabriel knew Warren, a cattle buyer who traveled the circuit between the ranches and the railheads. Is Warren still in town? Left yesterday for Sacramento. Gabriel nodded thoughtfully. Thank you, doctor. What do I owe you for attending Mrs. Tucker? The doctor waved away the offer. Consider it my contribution to helping that poor woman. Just find her child, Baxter. A mother shouldn't be separated from her baby. As the doctor drove away, Gabriel made his decision. He found Miguel in the stables again, already preparing for what he anticipated his employer would ask. I'm going after Tucker, Gabriel confirmed. I'll leave at first light. I need you to stay here, keep the ranch running, and look after Mrs. Tucker. You think he went to San Francisco? Miguel asked, sorting through saddle bags. It's the best lead we have. If he was looking for money to travel, he might have delayed his departure. I'll check the stage stations along the way. Later that evening, Gabriel looked in on Bethany. She was sitting up in bed, a bowl of Mrs. Hollis's beef stew untouched on the bedside table. Her copper hair had been washed and braided, and she wore a simple nightgown that must have belonged to Mrs. Hollis, the sleeves rolled up several times to accommodate her smaller frame. Mrs. Tucker, he said softly. May I come in? She nodded, her green eyes still red-rimmed but clearer than before. Please call me Bethany, and thank you for your kindness, Mr. Baxter. Gabriel, he corrected her, sitting in the chair beside the bed. How are you feeling? Better physically, she said, her fingers worrying at the quilt covering her. But Emma. Her voice caught. I have some information, Gabriel said gently. There's reason to believe your husband may be heading to San Francisco. I'm going after him tomorrow. Hope flared in Bethany's eyes, then dimmed. I should come with you. Gabriel shook his head. You need to regain your strength. Mrs. Hollis will care for you, and Miguel, my foreman, will be here if you need anything. But Emma won't come to a stranger, she protested. She's shy with people she doesn't know, and she needs to nurse. Gabriel considered this. She was right about the child being more likely to go to her mother, but the journey would be hard and potentially dangerous. Let me go ahead, he compromised. I'll find them first, make sure they don't move on, then send for you if necessary. Bethany studied him, her gaze direct despite her weakened state. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. Gabriel was silent for a moment. My mother was left by my father when I was just a boy, he finally said. She struggled to raise me alone. I know what it is to see someone you love suffer needlessly. He met her eyes. No child should be used as a weapon against their mother. A single tear slid down Bethany's cheek. Thank you, she whispered. Gabriel stood, uncomfortable with her gratitude. Try to eat something. You'll need your strength whether you stay or come with me. After he left, Bethany forced herself to eat the stew, though each bite felt like a struggle. As night fell, she slipped from her bed and made her way to the sitting room where the empty cradle sat. She lowered herself painfully to the floor beside it, resting her hand on the smooth wood. I'll find you, my sweet Emma, she promised quietly. Mama's coming. From the doorway, unnoticed, Gabriel watched her, his heart aching for this woman's pain. In that moment, he renewed his silent vow he would find her child and bring her home or die trying. The next morning, Gabriel woke before dawn to find Bethany in the kitchen, dressed in clothes Mrs. Hollis must have altered for her overnight, a simple calico dress that hung a bit loose on her thin frame. I'm coming with you, she said firmly, her chin set in determination. I spent the night thinking about it. Every moment I'm separated from Emma is agony. I can't just sit here waiting." Gabriel looked to Mrs. Hollies, who was frying bacon at the stove. The housekeeper gave a small shrug. "I told her she should rest, but she's determined." "The journey will be hard," Gabriel warned Bethany. "We'll be riding long days, sleeping rough." "I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania," Bethany replied. "I'm stronger than I look." Gabriel studied her. Despite the bruises fading on her face and the hollowness in her cheeks, there was fire in her eyes. He recognized the steel beneath her gentle exterior, the same quality his mother had possessed. "All right," he conceded. "But you follow my lead, and if I say something's too dangerous, you listen." "Deal, deal," she agreed without hesitation. They set out an hour later, Gabriel on his dappled gray stallion, Storm and Bethany on a gentle chestnut mare named Penny. Mrs. Hollies had packed them provisions, and Miguel had secured the empty cradle to Gabriel's saddle, a constant reminder of their purpose. "We'll follow the stage road," Gabriel explained as they rode. "There are stations every 15 to 20 miles where we can ask if anyone matching Tucker's description passed through with a baby." Bethany nodded, her hands steady on the reins despite her obvious discomfort from riding. "Thomas is a tall man, lean, dark hair and beard, both a bit unkempt. He has a scar through his right eyebrow from a bar fight." She swallowed hard. "And Emma has red hair like mine with a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon behind her left ear." Gabriel committed these details to memory. "How did you meet him?" he asked, partly to distract her from her pain, partly out of genuine curiosity. Bethany's expression clouded. "He came to our town in Pennsylvania as a cattle buyer. He was charming then, or seemed so. My father had just died, leaving debts, and the farm was failing. Thomas promised a fresh start in the West." She laughed bitterly. "By the time we reached Nevada, the charm had worn off. The drinking and gambling had been there all along, I suppose, but I was too naive to see it. What happened in Nevada? He was caught cheating at cards. We had to leave in the night." She looked away. "I was already with child by then, or I might have tried to get away from him. But where would I go? I had no money, no family nearby." Gabriel's estimation of Thomas Tucker sank even lower. "And no one helped you?" "People don't like to interfere between husband and wife," she said simply. "And Thomas was careful. The bruises were where they wouldn't show." She adjusted her position in the saddle, wincing slightly. "What about you? You mentioned your mother raised you alone." Gabriel nodded. "My father was a gambler too. Left when I was 8 after losing our farm in Missouri to bad debts. My mother took in washing, sewing, whatever she could to keep us fed." His jaw tightened at the memory. "She worked herself to death by the time I was 16. "I'm sorry," Bethany said softly. "It was a long time ago," Gabriel replied, though the pain had never fully faded. "I came west at 18, worked cattle drives, saved every penny, bought my first piece of land when I was 22. "You've built something to be proud of," she observed. Gabriel glanced at her, surprised by the genuine admiration in her voice. Most people saw his ranch as modest compared to the larger spreads in the area. "It's enough for me," he said simply. They reached the first stage station by midday. It was a small, weathered building with a corral and water trough, run by a grizzled old man named Jeb who remembered everyone who passed through. "A man with a baby." Jeb scratched his white beard thoughtfully. "Yeah, 2 days back. Mean-looking fellow, had the little one wrapped up tight. Child was fussing something fierce." Bethany's hand flew to her mouth. "That's them. Was Emma all right?" "The baby seemed hungry, madam. He tried to give her water, but she wouldn't take it." Jeb's roomy eyes narrowed. "You the mother?" "Yes," Bethany's voice trembled. "He took her from me." Jeb's expression hardened. "Figured something wasn't right. Man said he was a widower, taking his child to family in San Francisco. Gabriel's hand tightened on his saddle horn. Did he take the stage? Nope. Was hoping to, but didn't have enough coin. Last I saw, he was heading west on foot, trying to hitch a ride with passing wagons. Hope surged through Bethany. Then we can catch up to him. Likely so, Jeb agreed. There's been little traffic these past days, roads muddy from the spring rains further west. They thanked Jeb and rode on with renewed purpose. Bethany's face was flushed with determination despite her obvious fatigue. We should stop and rest, Gabriel suggested as the afternoon wore on. You're not fully recovered. No, Bethany insisted. Every hour counts. Emma hasn't nursed in days. She must be starving. Gabriel couldn't argue with her desperation. They pressed on until dusk, stopping only when it became too dark to safely navigate the road. They made camp beneath an oak tree a little way from the road. Gabriel built a small fire and prepared a simple meal of jerky, beans, and coffee. Bethany ate mechanically, her mind clearly elsewhere. After dinner, she disappeared briefly into the darkness, returning with her dress damp at the front. Seeing Gabriel's questioning look, she explained with quiet dignity, "I've been expressing milk when I can, to keep my supply going. For when we find Emma." Gabriel nodded, averting his eyes to give her privacy in this intimate maternal act. The simple, determined gesture moved him deeply. This woman's strength, her absolute devotion to her child, stirred something in him he hadn't felt in years, admiration bordering on awe. As they settled for the night, Bethany on one side of the fire with Gabriel's bedroll, Gabriel on the other with just his saddle for a pillow, he watched her cradle the empty air in her arms, humming softly as if to a child. "We're coming, Emma," she whispered into the night. "Hold on just a little longer." Gabriel turned away, giving her this private moment of longing. His last thought before sleep claimed him was that Thomas Tucker would pay dearly if any harm had come to that baby girl. The next morning, they were on the road at first light. Bethany was stiff from sleeping on the ground, but she made no complaint as they mounted up. They'd ridden for perhaps 2 hours when they came upon a farmer's wagon heading east. Gabriel hailed the driver, a middle-aged man with a weathered face and kind eyes. "Good morning, sir. We're looking for a man traveling with a baby girl. Might you have passed them on the road?" The farmer nodded immediately. "Yesterday afternoon. Gave him a ride for a few miles. Baby was crying something fierce, poor thing. Man said he was widowed, heading to family." "That's my husband," Bethany burst out. "He took our daughter from me. I'm very much alive, as you can see." The farmer's expression darkened with understanding. "About 10 miles ahead, there's a fork in the road. The North Fork leads to Sacramento. The south continues west toward San Francisco." "I left him at that junction." "Did he say which way he was heading?" Gabriel pressed. "He asked about both routes," the farmer replied thoughtfully. "Seemed particularly interested in which had more traffic, more chance of catching a ride." "And," Bethany leaned forward anxiously, "I told him Sacramento was busier this time of year with the mining supplies and such." The farmer looked troubled. "The baby hadn't stopped crying the whole time. I offered to have my wife look at her when we reached our farm, but he refused." Bethany's face paled. "She's hungry. She needs to nurse." The farmer reached into his wagon and pulled out a small cloth bundle. "My wife insisted I take this along today, said I might meet someone who needed it. It's goat's milk, fresh from this morning. If you find the little one, it might help until." He glanced at Bethany with understanding. Bethany took the bundle with tears in her eyes. "Thank you. One more thing," the farmer added. "The man had a nasty cough, kept turning away from the baby when it came on him." Gabriel and Bethany exchanged worried glances. If Thomas was ill, It could explain his increasingly erratic behavior and put Emma at even greater risk. They thanked the farmer and rode on with increased urgency. By mid-afternoon, they reached the fork in the road the farmer had mentioned. Gabriel dismounted, studying the ground carefully. "Tracks here are confusing," he said after a few minutes. "Several wagons have passed recently." Bethany slid down from her horse, wincing as her feet hit the ground. "Which way would he go?" she asked desperately. "He told Jeb he was heading to San Francisco, but told that farmer he was looking for the busier road." Gabriel frowned. A man like Tucker would go where he thought he could find opportunity, money, gambling. "Sacramento," Bethany said decisively. "There's more activity there with the mines and the railroad." Gabriel nodded in agreement. "Sacramento it is." They took the North Fork, pushing their horses as much as they dared. As the day waned, Gabriel noticed Bethany swaying slightly in her saddle, her face drawn with exhaustion. "We need to stop for the night," he said firmly. "You're about to fall off that horse." Bethany started to protest, but seemed to recognize the truth in his words. They found a sheltered spot near a small stream, and Gabriel quickly set up camp while Bethany tended to the horses. After a meager supper, Bethany sat close to the fire, arms wrapped around herself. "What if we chose wrong?" she asked softly. "What if he went to San Francisco after all?" Gabriel moved to sit beside her, offering the comfort of his presence. "Then we'll change course." "But my gut tells me we're on the right track." She looked at him, her green eyes reflecting the firelight. "I keep thinking about Emma, whether she's crying, if she's cold or afraid." "Try not to torture yourself," Gabriel said gently. "Children are resilient, and we're gaining on them." Bethany nodded, but her expression remained haunted. "May I ask you something personal, Gabriel?" "Of course." "You said we would fill the cradle with love," she said softly. "What did you mean by that?" Gabriel was silent for a long moment, considering how to answer. "I meant that whether we find Emma, and we will, or whether we need to look for her longer, that cradle won't remain empty. There's always hope to be found, even in the darkest times." Bethany studied him thoughtfully. "You're not what I expected when I first saw you." "Oh," he raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" "Just another cowboy passing through, someone who'd tip his hat and continue on his way." Her voice softened. "Not someone who would put his own life on hold to help a stranger." Gabriel shrugged, uncomfortable with her praise. "Any decent man would do the same." "No," Bethany said with quiet certainty. "They wouldn't. I've learned that lesson well over the past 2 years." The vulnerability in her admission touched Gabriel deeply. On impulse, he reached out and covered her hand with his own. "Get some rest, Bethany. Tomorrow may bring us to Emma." She turned her hand to squeeze his briefly before withdrawing. "Good night, Gabriel." As she settled into her bedroll, Gabriel remained by the fire, keeping watch. The empty cradle sat nearby, a constant reminder of their mission. He found himself wondering what kind of father Thomas Tucker had been, or rather, hadn't been, to abandon his child to starvation and exposure. His thoughts drifted to what kind of father he himself might be, given the chance. Looking at Bethany's sleeping form, Gabriel acknowledged the growing feelings within him. This woman's courage, her unwavering devotion to her child, moved him in ways he hadn't expected. He'd gone through life focused on building his ranch, content with his solitary existence. Now, suddenly, he found himself imagining a different future, one with a family of his own. Shaking off these unexpected thoughts, Gabriel banked the fire and lay down to sleep. Tomorrow they would reach Sacramento and, with luck, find Emma. They arrived in Sacramento by mid-afternoon the following day. The city bustled with activity, miners headed to the Sierras, merchants hawking their wares, construction everywhere as the city rebuilt after recent floods. The noise and crowds overwhelmed Bethany after days in the quiet countryside. "Where do we start looking?" she asked, eyes darting nervously around the crowded streets. Gabriel guided their horses toward a quieter side street. "We need to think like Tucker. If he's low on money and traveling with a baby, he'd need cheap lodging." "He might try to sell something for cash," Bethany suggested. "He still had his pocket watch when he left." "The pawn shops would be a good place to ask," Gabriel nodded. "Let's secure rooms first, then start our search." They found modest accommodations at a small hotel near the waterfront. The proprietor, Mrs. Chen, was a sharp-eyed Chinese woman who took in Bethany's exhausted state with a sympathetic glance. "You need rest, food," she said firmly. "I bring tea soup." "Thank you, but we must," Bethany began. "You must eat," Mrs. Chen interrupted. "Then search." "Baby not found if mama falls down sick." Gabriel shot the woman a grateful look. "She's right, Bethany. Take an hour to refresh yourself. I'll start asking at the pawn shops nearby." Reluctantly, Bethany agreed. After Mrs. Chen brought a tray of fragrant soup and tea, Gabriel left to begin his inquiries, promising to return within 2 hours. The first 3 pawn shops yielded nothing, but at the fourth, a dingy establishment wedged between a saloon and a cobbler's shop, Gabriel struck gold. "Man with a baby." The pawnbroker, a balding man with spectacles perched on his bulbous nose, nodded immediately. "Yesterday afternoon, tried to sell me a silver pocket watch, but it was obviously stolen goods." Gabriel's pulse quickened. "How do you know?" "Had another man's initials engraved on it. S.W." The pawnbroker shrugged. "I don't buy trouble." Silas Warren, the cattle buyer who'd won Tucker's watch in a card game. "Did he sell anything else?" "A wedding ring," the man said. "Plain gold band, probably his wife's. Said she was dead, but he had a cough that wouldn't quit and looked like death himself. Baby was quiet, though. Too quiet, if you ask me." Gabriel felt a chill. "Do you know where he went after leaving here?" Mentioned needing a doctor for himself. "I suggested the charity hospital by the river." Gabriel thanked the man and hurried back to the hotel, his mind racing. If Tucker was ill enough to seek medical attention, perhaps they'd keep him there long enough for Gabriel and Bethany to catch up. When he returned, he found Bethany pacing the small room, her hair damp from washing, wearing the same dress but looking somewhat revived. "I have news," Gabriel said, quickly relaying what he'd learned. Hope blazed in Bethany's eyes. "The hospital, we must go immediately." They hurried through the crowded streets, the empty Cradle left behind at the hotel. The charity hospital was a large, utilitarian building near the riverfront, the air around it thick with the smell of carbolic acid and illness. Inside, they approached a harried-looking nurse at a desk piled with papers. "We're looking for a man who may have come in yesterday," Gabriel explained. "Thomas Tucker. He would have had a baby girl with him." The nurse frowned, consulting her register. "Tucker." "Yes, admitted yesterday evening with pneumonia. Quite serious. And the baby?" Bethany asked urgently. "Was there a baby girl with red hair?" The nurse looked up, her expression softening at Bethany's obvious distress. "There was a child, yes. Are you the mother?" "Yes." Bethany clutched the edge of the desk. "Where is she? Please, I need to see her." "Follow me," the nurse said, rising from her desk. "The child is in our children's ward. She was very malnourished when they arrived." Bethany's face crumpled, and Gabriel placed a steadying hand at the small of her back as they followed the nurse down a long corridor. The children's ward was a large room with a dozen small beds, most occupied by pale, sickly children. The nurse led them to a crib in the corner, where a thin, red-haired infant lay sleeping. "Emma!" Bethany rushed forward, tears streaming down her face as she gathered her daughter into her arms. The baby's eyes fluttered open the same vivid green as her mother's, and after a moment of confusion, her tiny face lit with recognition. A weak cry escaped her lips as she nuzzled against her mother's chest. "Oh, my sweet girl," Bethany wept, rocking her daughter gently. "Mama's here now. You're safe." Gabriel stood back, his own eyes burning with emotion as he watched the reunion. Emma was clearly underweight, her skin pale and slightly jaundiced, but she was alive and alert, her tiny hands reaching for her mother's face. A doctor approached, a kindly older man with a gray beard. "You must be Mrs. Tucker," he said gently. "Your daughter is malnourished but responding well to the goat's milk we've been feeding her. With proper nursing, she should recover quickly." "Thank you," Bethany said fervently, not taking her eyes off Emma. "May I nurse her now?" "Of course. There's a private room for mothers just there." He indicated a door across the ward. "But first, you should know about your husband's condition." Bethany looked up, her expression hardening. "What about him?" "His pneumonia is severe. He's been asking for you and for the child." Gabriel stepped forward. "Is he in custody?" "He kidnapped that child and abused her mother." The doctor looked startled. "No, he's simply being treated. He claimed to be a widower." "He lied," Bethany said firmly. "He took my daughter from me 4 days ago after beating me unconscious. I want him arrested." "I'll notify the sheriff," the doctor promised. "In the meantime, why don't you tend to your daughter?" Bethany nodded, carrying Emma to the mother's room. Gabriel followed, stopping at the doorway. "I'll wait here," he said gently. "Take your time." Bethany turned to him, her eyes shining with tears of relief and gratitude. "Gabriel, I don't know how to thank you. No thanks needed," he interrupted softly. "Go be with your daughter." As the door closed behind her, Gabriel leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by the events of the past few days. They'd found Emma, alive. The relief he felt was profound, matched only by his anger toward the man who had put mother and child through such torment. The doctor returned after a few minutes. "Mr. Baxter, Mrs. Tucker's husband is asking specifically to speak with you. He seems to know who you are." Gabriel frowned. "I've never met Thomas Tucker." "Nevertheless, he's quite insistent. He's very weak, probably won't last the night. Whatever his crimes, you might want to hear what he has to say." Reluctantly, Gabriel followed the doctor to another ward, where screens had been placed around a bed in the corner. Behind them lay Thomas Tucker, a gaunt man with dark, sunken eyes and a face ravaged by illness and hard living. He looked older than his probable years, his breathing labored and painful. "Baxter," Tucker wheezed as Gabriel approached. "Heard the nurses talking about the cowboy with the pretty red head." "What do you want, Tucker?" Gabriel asked coldly. Tucker's cracked lips curved in a mirthless smile. "Wanted to see the man who thinks he'll take my place." A coughing fit overtook him, flecks of blood appearing on his lips. When it subsided, he continued weakly. "She's damaged goods, Baxter, frigid as ice." Gabriel's hands clenched into fists. "You're dying, Tucker. Make peace with your maker instead of spewing hatred." "Tell me something," Tucker persisted, his voice barely audible. "Did she tell you about the first baby, the one that died?" Gabriel stilled, shocked by this revelation. "What are you talking about? Born too early. In Nevada. Boy. Lived an hour." Tucker's eyes gleamed with malice. "She's cursed, Baxter. The cradle was never meant to be filled." Another coughing fit seized him, more violent than the last. The doctor rushed forward as Tucker began to choke on his own blood, but it was too late. Within moments, Thomas Tucker was dead, his final words a cruel attempt to poison Gabriel's mind against Bethany. Gabriel stood frozen, processing what he'd just heard. A first baby, lost in Nevada. The empty cradle taking on new, deeper significance. Had Bethany kept this from him deliberately? Or was it simply too painful to speak of? The doctor covered Tucker's face with the sheet. "I'm sorry you had to witness that," he said quietly. "I'll notify the sheriff that he's passed." Gabriel nodded mechanically and made his way back to the children's ward. Outside the mother's room, he paused, uncertain. Through the partially open door, he could hear Bethany singing softly to Emma, a lullaby about moonlight and dreams. The tenderness in her voice made his heart constrict. Tucker's words echoed in his mind. The cradle was never meant to be filled. Had the dying man been telling the truth? Or was it one final act of cruelty toward the wife he had abused? Gabriel steeled himself and knocked gently on the door. Bethany looked up, her face transformed by joy as she nursed her daughter. Emma's tiny hand was wrapped around her mother's finger, her eyes closed in contentment. "He's gone," Gabriel said simply. "Tucker passed a few minutes ago." Bethany's expression flickered relief mingled with something more complex. She looked down at Emma, then back at Gabriel. "Did he suffer?" "Yes," Gabriel answered honestly. "But it's over now. You're both free of him." Bethany nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I should feel something more. Grief, perhaps, but all I feel is relief." Gabriel moved closer, sitting on a chair beside them. "Bethany," he began carefully, "Tucker said something before he died, about a first baby in Nevada." Her face went very still, her eyes closing briefly in pain. When she opened them, they were swimming with tears. "He told you about my son. Was it true?" "Yes," she whispered. "His name was Matthew. He came too early, only 7 months along. The doctor said it was because of the fall I took when Thomas pushed me." Her voice broke. "Matthew lived long enough for me to hold him, to count his perfect little fingers and toes. Then he was gone." Gabriel's heart ached for her. "I'm so sorry, Bethany. The cradle was meant for him first," she continued, her gaze returning to Emma. "I couldn't bear to use it when Emma came. It sat empty in our house all these months like a ghost. Thomas knew how much it hurt me to see it." Her voice hardened. "That's why he took it when he left with Emma. One final cruelty." Gabriel reached out, gently stroking Emma's downy red hair. "No more cruelty," he promised quietly. "Only kindness from now on." Bethany looked up at him, vulnerability and hope warring in her eyes. "What happens now? Where do we go from here?" Before Gabriel could answer, the doctor returned with a sheriff in tow. The lawman, a broad-shouldered man with a stern face, took their statements about Tucker's abuse and the kidnapping. When he learned that Tucker had died, he closed his notebook with a sigh. "Saved the county the cost of a trial and hanging," he said bluntly. "Mrs. Tucker, there'll be paperwork regarding your husband's death, but that can wait until tomorrow. For now, the doctor says your little girl should stay here overnight for observation." "I won't leave her," Bethany said immediately. "Of course not, madam. We can bring in a cot for you." The sheriff turned to Gabriel. "You her brother's friend," Gabriel corrected. "I helped her track down Tucker and the baby." The sheriff nodded. "Good man, Mrs. Tucker. Once the doctor releases your daughter, do you have somewhere to go?" Bethany glanced uncertainly at Gabriel. In that look, he read her question, the same one she had asked him moments before. "What happens now?" "She and Emma will be coming back to my ranch in Wasco," Gabriel said with quiet certainty. "They have a home there for as long as they need it." Gratitude flooded Bethany's expression. The sheriff seemed satisfied and took his leave after promising to return the next day with the necessary documents. Left alone again, Bethany shifted Emma to her shoulder, patting the baby's back gently. "You don't have to do this, Gabriel. You've already done more than enough." "I want to," he said simply. "Unless you'd rather go elsewhere." She shook her head, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "No, I would like to accept your offer. For now, at least, until I can figure out what comes next." Gabriel smiled, feeling something tight in his chest loosen. "Then it's settled. I'll return to the hotel, collect our things, and make arrangements for our journey home tomorrow, assuming the doctor releases Emma." "Home," Bethany repeated softly, the word sounding like a question and a hope all at once. The next day, the doctor pronounced Emma well enough to travel, though he cautioned that the journey should be taken in easy stages. The baby had already gained weight overnight, her color improved, her cries stronger. Bethany, too, seemed transformed, the shadows beneath her eyes lighter, her movements more assured. They left Sacramento by mid-morning, traveling in a rented buggy Gabriel had procured rather than on horseback, with their horses tethered behind. The empty cradle was secured in the back, no longer a symbol of loss but of a new beginning. As they crossed the valley toward Wasco, Bethany kept Emma close, singing and talking to her constantly as if to make up for their days apart. Gabriel found himself enchanted by both mother and child, by Bethany's gentle strength and Emma's determined grip on life. They stopped frequently to allow Bethany to nurse Emma and to rest. At these times, Gabriel would sometimes hold the baby, marveling at how tiny and perfect she was, how her green eyes, so like her mother's, seemed to study him with solemn curiosity. "She likes you," Bethany observed during one such rest stop, watching as Emma wrapped her small fingers around Gabriel's large, calloused thumb. "She's a good judge of character," he replied with a smile. "Takes after her mother." Bethany's expression clouded. "I wasn't always. I chose Thomas after all. You were young and in difficult circumstances," Gabriel said gently. "And some men are skilled at hiding their true nature until it's too late." She nodded, accepting his words. "I won't make that mistake again." The journey took 3 days, with overnight stays at roadside inns where Bethany and Emma shared a room, and Gabriel took another. Each evening, they would sit together after Emma was asleep, talking quietly about their lives, their hopes, their fears. Gabriel learned that Bethany had been a schoolteacher before her marriage, that she loved poetry and wildflowers, that she dreamed of having a garden again someday. In turn, he told her about his plans for the ranch, about the books he read during the quiet winter months, about his dream of someday raising fine horses as well as cattle. By the time they reached the outskirts of Wasco, Gabriel realized with startling clarity that he was falling in love with Bethany Tucker, with her resilience, her tenderness, her quiet intelligence. The realization both elated and frightened him. She was newly widowed, still recovering from years of abuse, focused entirely on her daughter. The last thing she needed was another man making demands on her. Mrs. Hollis and Miguel were waiting at the ranch house when they arrived, having received Gabriel's telegram from Sacramento. The housekeeper immediately took charge of Bethany and Emma, fussing over them both, while Miguel helped Gabriel with the horses and luggage. "You did good, Chief," the foreman said quietly, nodding toward Bethany and Emma on the porch. "Brought them home safe." Home. There was that word again, laden with meaning and possibility. Gabriel watched as Bethany paused at the door, turning to look back at him with a smile of such genuine gratitude that it made his breath catch. "Welcome home," he called, and was rewarded with a widening of her smile before she disappeared inside with Mrs. Hollis. Later that evening, after Emma had been fed and settled in the cradle now placed in Bethany's room, Gabriel found Bethany on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the spring evening chill. "May I join you?" he asked. She nodded, moving over on the bench to make room for him. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue sky. "I sent a telegram to my sister in Pennsylvania today," Bethany said eventually, "to let her know about Thomas and that Emma and I are safe. Will she come west?" Gabriel asked, trying to keep the apprehension from his voice. No, she can't leave her family, but she was relieved. Bethany turned slightly to face him. Gabriel, I need to ask you something important. He steeled himself, fearing she was about to announce plans to return east. Of course. Why did you really help me? The truth. Gabriel considered the question carefully. At first, it was simple human decency. A woman in distress, a child in danger. He paused, gathering his courage. But it became more than that. I came to admire you, Bethany. Your courage, your devotion to Emma, your refusal to be broken by what you'd endured. She watched him intently, her expression unreadable in the gathering darkness. And now, he said softly, I find myself hoping you'll stay, not just for a while, but permanently. Bethany's breath caught. Gabriel, I know it's too soon, he hurried on. You're still grieving, still healing. And I would never presume to replace Emma's father, but I want you to know that there's a place for you both here for as long as you want it. No obligations, no expectations. She was silent for so long that Gabriel began to fear he had overstepped. Then, hesitantly, she reached out and took his hand. When you found me under that cottonwood tree, she said quietly, I had nothing left. No hope, no future, just an empty cradle and a broken heart. You gave me back my daughter, my dignity, my belief that there are good men in this world. Her voice wavered. I'm not ready for anything more than friendship right now, but I would like to stay if you're sure. Relief and joy washed through Gabriel. I'm sure, he said firmly, squeezing her hand gently. This is your home for as long as you want it to be. She smiled, the starlight catching the tears in her eyes. Then we accept. Emma and I will stay. In the weeks that followed, Bethany and Emma settled into life at the ranch. The baby thrived, growing plumper and more active with each passing day. Her first real laugh came one evening as Gabriel was making funny faces at her. The sound so pure and joyful that both adults froze in wonder before breaking into delighted laughter themselves. Bethany, too, blossomed in the safety and peace of the ranch. Her bruises faded, her slender frame filled out with proper nutrition, and color returned to her cheeks. She began helping Mrs. Hollies with cooking and household tasks, planted a small vegetable garden behind the house, and even started reading to the ranch hands during evening meals stories and poems that transported them all from the hard work of their days. Gabriel found himself looking forward to evenings most of all, when the work was done, and they would sit together on the porch or by the fire. Sometimes they talked for hours. Other times they simply enjoyed the silence together. Emma sleeping nearby in her cradle, no longer empty, no longer a symbol of loss. As spring turned to summer, Bethany received a package from her sister in Pennsylvania, a small trunk containing some of her belongings from before her marriage. Among them were books, a silver hairbrush that had been her mother's, and a daguerreotype of her parents. She wept when she showed these treasures to Gabriel, not from sadness but from the joy of reconnecting with her past. I never thought I'd see these again, she explained, carefully arranging the books on a shelf Gabriel had built for her. Thomas sold most of my things when money was tight. Gabriel watched her lovingly place each item, struck by how natural it seemed to have her things mingling with his own. The house feels more like a home with you and Emma here, he said honestly. She turned to him with a shy smile. It feels like home to us too. It was midsummer when the sheriff from Sacramento passed through Wasco and stopped at the ranch. He brought official papers confirming Thomas Tucker's death and formalizing Bethany's status as a widow. Thought you'd want these, Mrs. Tucker, he said, handing over the documents. Makes everything legal and proper. After he left, Bethany sat on the porch steps staring at the papers in her hands. Gabriel came to sit beside her, respecting her silence. It's really over, she said finally. I'm free. How does it feel? He asked gently. She considered the question seriously. Sad in a way, not for Thomas himself, but for what might have been in a different life. She glanced toward the house where Emma was napping. But mostly I feel relief and hope. Gabriel nodded, understanding. Hope is good. Bethany folded the papers carefully. There's something I've been wanting to tell you, Gabriel, something I realized recently. His heart quickened. What's that? When Thomas was alive, I thought of myself as his wife, even though I hated what our marriage had become. There was a certain inertia to it. I couldn't imagine being anything else. She took a deep breath. But now I realize I'm not just Thomas Tucker's widow. I'm Bethany, just Bethany. And I get to decide who I want to be, what kind of life I want for Emma and myself. Gabriel smiled, hearing the newfound confidence in her voice. And who do you want to be, Bethany? She looked at him directly, her green eyes clear and certain. Someone brave, someone who trusts again, who loves again, someone who fills not just Emma's cradle but my own life with love. The significance of her words was not lost on Gabriel. Tentatively, he reached for her hand. I'd like to help with that if you'll let me. I'd like that too, she whispered, entwining her fingers with his. That evening, after Emma was asleep, they sat on the porch swing, closer than they had before. The summer night was warm, fragrant with the scent of wildflowers and sage. In the distance, coyotes called to one another under a rising moon. Tell me about your dreams, Gabriel, Bethany said, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. Not just for the ranch, but for yourself. Gabriel thought about the question, about how his dreams had changed since finding Bethany under the cottonwood tree with her empty cradle. I always thought building the ranch was enough, he said slowly, making it successful, secure. But lately I've been thinking there should be more to a man's legacy than just land and cattle. What kind of legacy do you want to leave? She asked. He turned slightly to look at her, his expression serious. A family, children who grow up knowing they're loved and valued, a home filled with books and laughter and music. He paused, gathering his courage. A wife who's my partner in everything, who shares my dreams and adds her own. Bethany's eyes shimmered in the moonlight. That sounds like a beautiful dream. It doesn't have to be just a dream, Gabriel said softly. Bethany, I know it's only been a few months since you came here and I promise not to rush you, but I need you to know that I've fallen in love with you. With your strength, your gentleness, your capacity for joy despite everything you've endured. He touched her cheek gently. I love Emma too, as if she were my own, and if you need more time, I'll wait, however long it takes. Tears spilled onto Bethany's cheeks, but she was smiling. I don't need more time, Gabriel. I love you too. I think I've loved you since you found me with my empty cradle at dawn and promised to fill it with love. She leaned into his touch. You kept that promise. You helped bring Emma back to me, but you've done so much more. You've shown me what real love looks like, patient, kind, respectful. Gabriel's heart soared. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned in and kissed her. It was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. When she responded, her lips soft and yielding beneath his, the kiss deepened, becoming a promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Gabriel pressed his forehead to hers. Marry me, Bethany. Let me be a father to Emma and perhaps, someday, to other children we might have together. Yes, she whispered without hesitation. Yes, I'll marry you, Gabriel Baxter. They were married in early autumn, a simple ceremony in the town church with only a few friends in attendance. Emma, now almost a year old and taking her first wobbly steps, was dressed in a white gown sewn by Mrs. Hollies. Bethany wore a dress of pale blue silk, a gift from Gabriel, with wildflowers in her copper hair. As they spoke their vows, Gabriel felt a sense of rightness, of completion, that he had never known before. This woman and child had become his world, his reason for everything. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Gabriel kissed Bethany with a tenderness that made the few guests sigh with approval. The celebration afterward at the ranch was joyful but intimate. Miguel and the ranch hands had decorated the yard with paper lanterns and ribbons, and Mrs. Hollies had prepared a feast that would be talked about for months. As evening fell, Gabriel took his new wife's hand and led her to the center of the yard for their first dance as husband and wife. "Happy?" he asked, holding her close as they swayed to the fiddle music played by one of the hands. "Completely," she answered, her eyes reflecting the lantern light, "though I still can't quite believe it's real sometimes." "It's real," he assured her, spinning her gently, "and it's just the beginning." Later, after the guests had gone and Emma was asleep in her cradle, now decorated with fresh ribbons, and placed in the nursery adjacent to their bedroom, Gabriel carried Bethany over the threshold of their room. He had expanded it in the weeks before the wedding, adding windows that overlooked the eastern hills where the sun would rise. "I have something for you," he said, setting her gently on her feet. From a drawer, he withdrew a small wooden box, intricately carved with flowers similar to those on Emma's cradle. Bethany opened it to find a delicate gold locket on a chain. Inside was a tiny portrait of Emma on one side, and on the other, a lock of reddish gold baby hair. "Gabriel," she breathed, touching the hair reverently, "is this?" "From Matthew," he confirmed softly. "Your sister sent it. She kept a lock that you sent her after he was born." He took her hand. "I want you to know that I honor all of your past, Bethany, the joys and the sorrows. Matthew will always be your firstborn and a part of our family." Tears filled her eyes as she embraced him fiercely. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest, "for understanding, for remembering him with me." Gabriel held her close, marveling at the journey that had brought them together. From an empty cradle to a home filled with love, from strangers to husband and wife. As he kissed her, he silently renewed the promise he'd made that dawn beneath the cottonwood tree to fill her life with love every day, for all the days they had together. True to their vows, Gabriel and Bethany built a life rich in love and purpose. The ranch prospered under their joint care, Gabriel managing the cattle and land, Bethany keeping the books, and eventually starting a small school for the children of neighboring ranches and the ranch hands' families. Emma grew into a lively, intelligent child with her mother's red hair and compassionate nature, and her adoptive father's quiet confidence. In the spring following their marriage, Bethany discovered she was expecting another child. The pregnancy was marked by equal parts joy and anxiety, the memories of Matthew's loss still painful. Gabriel surrounded her with care, ensuring she rested properly and had the best medical attention available, even bringing a doctor from San Francisco to stay at the ranch for the final month. Their son, Daniel Matthew Baxter, was born healthy and strong on a winter night with snow falling softly outside the windows. As Gabriel placed the newborn in Emma's cradle, the same one he had found Bethany with that fateful dawn, he felt the circle of their family story complete itself. The cradle that had once been empty was now filled again, not just with a child, but with the love and hope that had brought them together. Over the years, 2 more children joined their family, twin girls, Sarah and Grace, who arrived with the spring flowers 3 years after Daniel. The Baxter household became known throughout the county for its warmth and hospitality, the ranch a place where travelers were always welcome, where those in need found help, and where the children of Wasco could come to learn and grow. Bethany never forgot the dark days of her first marriage, but they faded into the background of a life filled with purpose and joy. The empty cradle that had once symbolized her greatest loss became instead the beginning of her greatest happiness, a tangible reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope could be found. On their 20th anniversary, Gabriel surprised Bethany with a new cradle he had carved himself, ready for the grandchildren they hoped would someday come. As they stood together on the porch of their home, watching their children playing in the yard below, he wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her copper hair now threaded with silver. "You remember what I said to you that first morning?" he asked softly. Bethany leaned back against him, covering his hands with her own. "You said we would fill the empty cradle with love. And did we?" She turned in his arms, her green eyes still as bright and clear as when he'd first seen them filled with tears beneath the cottonwood tree. "We filled it many times over," she said, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "And we'll keep filling it with children, grandchildren, and all the love that keeps growing between us." As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Gabriel and Bethany Baxter stood entwined, their promises kept, their hearts full, their once empty cradle a distant memory replaced by the abundance of the life they had built together.